You know that feeling? You're drowning in information, just mountains of it, and you think, man, I wish someone could just boil this down for me.
Yeah, like give you the good stuff, the shortcut to really getting it.
Exactly. Well, that's what we're aiming for here.
Consider this your curated path through some pretty fascinating ideas, all sparked by sources you picked out.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a really interesting mix insights from YouTube transcripts and this academic paper, Caótica in Arquitectura.
Sounds a bit eclectic, maybe.
It does, but I think the connections are going to be, well, pretty revealing.
Right. Our mission, if you will, is to explore this idea of chaos. Not just, messiness, but as a way to understand complex stuff.
Especially in architecture, which is so grounded in how we live.
Exactly. We want to see how these different sources help us rethink the whole design process.
Because it's amazing how they touch on everything design, sure, but also the philosophy of science, how we know things, even basic human needs, and the buildings around us.
It all weaves together.
Okay, so let's jump in. This word chaos, what are we actually talking about? Seems like it's had a few meanings over the years.
It really has.
Yeah.
If you go way back, the ancient Greeks saw chaos as like the void, nothingness, before anything was created.
The primordial soup, kind of?
Sort of, yeah. Then you have the biblical idea, the earth starting as chaos and confusion, unformed.
So a lack of order, basically. That's the root.
That's the common thread initially. But then science takes the word and does something, well, quite different with it.
Right. Chaos theory isn't just about things being messy or random, is it?
Not at all, no. Scientifically, chaos describes how certain complex systems behave. It's about looking at the whole system, how all the bits are connected.
Okay.
And the key thing is this sensitivity to initial conditions. You've heard of the butterfly effect.
Sure, a butterfly flaps its wings.
And causes a hurricane halfway across the world. Well, maybe not literally, but the idea is that a tiny, tiny change somewhere can have massive, unpredictable effects later on.
Because everything's connected.
Precisely. You've got lots of different elements all bumping into each other, causing effects, and it creates this inherent instability. It looks random, but there's an underlying deterministic process. Now, hang on to that idea, interconnected systems, unpredictable results, because the paper argues that designing a building, that's exactly that kind of chaotic system.
Interesting.
But before we dive fully into architecture, this scientific view of chaos, it didn't just appear quietly. It caused some friction, didn't it? This war of the sciences.
Ah, yes. Tell us about that.
So the 20th century saw this big intellectual clash. Basically, natural sciences versus the humanities and social sciences, arguing about what counts as real knowledge, the right way to find things out.
And the Sokal incident was a big moment in that, right? Some physicist tricked a journal.
He did. Alan Sokal, 1996. He wrote an article full of jargon, references, sounded very academic.
But it was, actually.
Complete nonsense, deliberately meaningless. And he got it published in Social Text, a well-known cultural studies journal.
Wow. Okay, so why? What was he trying to prove?
Sokal wanted to critique what he saw as shallowness in parts of the humanities. He felt some academics were using scientific terms without really understanding them, just sort of name-dropping concept.
Intellectual posing, basically.
That was his claim. He felt they weren't being rigorous enough.
So from the science side, it was like, look, your standards aren't the same as ours. Evidence, logic, that sort of thing.
That was definitely a view held by many natural scientists. They value empirical data, testable ideas.
And the other side, how did the humanities folks react?
Well, many were, understandably, quite upset. They saw it as a cheap shot, a destructive stunt that wasn't about real dialogue, more about embarrassing them than constructive criticism.
Shutting down conversation instead of starting one.
Exactly. Though, interestingly, the text suggests some within the humanities did see it as a moment for maybe some self-reflection, which leads to the question, okay, how do we bridge these different ways of knowing?
Yeah, how do we get past this divide? The text brings up Edgar Morin and complex thinking. What's that about?
Morin's idea is about moving beyond that strict separation. He argues there's a deep connection, a kind of symbiosis between nature and spirit, or the natural world and human consciousness.
Okay.
His point is, all knowledge, physics, sociology, whatever, is made by us, by humans living in a physical world. And that world shapes how we think, how we understand. There's no purely objective viewpoint floating outside of it all.
So even hard science is shaped by us being human, and soft science is grounded in physical reality. They're tangled up.
Exactly that. Complex thinking means recognizing we're embodied thinkers. Our minds aren't separate from the world, and our science is influenced by culture, by society.
So dismissing whole fields because they don't fit one definition of rigor is maybe missing the bigger picture.
That's the implication, yes. It's a limited view. Now, let's take this idea, interconnectedness and complexity, and bring it back to architecture.
Right, the Caótica and Arquitectura paper.
Yes. It argues the whole process of building the architectural design process, or PDA, isn't some neat checklist. It's a convergence of multiple, interconnected, chaotic systems.
Multiple systems. Wow. Okay, what are they?
The paper lays out several. First, there's the system of needs. And this isn't just we need 4 walls and a roof.
Goes deeper than that.
Much deeper. It includes material and spiritual needs. And critically, these needs are shaped by culture, by society. The paper mentions a tradition in Michoacan involving specific breads after weddings. That's a cultural need.
Okay.
And it contrasts that with, say, the distorted needs seen in eating disorders showing psychological social influences. So need isn't fixed. It's fluid. It's cultural.
That's a really useful way to think about it. What's the next system?
The system of place, the actual site. Now, the site exists physically, obviously, but it's also loaded with social, meaning land ownership, history, cultural value.
Like how different groups might see the same piece of land completely differently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The paper mentions the Apache conflict over land, or indigenous views of land, as sacred, not just property. Even ancient examples, like the Mayans aligning buildings at Uxmal with Venus.
Wow.
And then, of course, you have the more standard stuff. Climate, topography, infrastructure, the urban fabric around it. The site isn't blank. It comes with baggage, physical and social.
Definitely not a blank slate. Got it. What else?
Then there's the sociocultural model. This is basically the cultural environment, the habitus, as sociologist Bourdieu called it. It's the ingrained stuff that shapes how designers and users think what they need, how they see the place, what feels right in terms of design.
Like unspoken rules or preferences?
Sort of, yeah. Think about traditional Japanese house design, the flexible spaces, connection to nature that reflects a specific cultural habitus. It influences needs and perception of place.
Okay, culture shaping needs and how we see the site. What about the architect's actual tools?
Ah, yes. The system of tools for design. This is huge. It goes from, old school ruling pens and T-squares,
Right.
all the way to complex CAD software, like AutoCAD or ArchiCAD. And the key point is, these tools aren't neutral bystanders. They actively shape the process.
Oh, so?
Well, the kinds of complex shapes you can easily generate in CAD might lead you down design paths you'd never have considered or couldn't have practically achieved with just drafting tools. Learning a specific tool shapes how you think, what you prioritize.
That makes sense. The tool enables, but also maybe limits in other ways. Who else gets pulled into this web?
Well, the system of the designer itself. And this isn't just one architect in isolation.
It's a team. Or
It includes colleagues, critics they respect, the client, hugely important, with their own agenda, and even regulatory bodies like the planning department. All these people are their own complex systems with their own viewpoints, their own biases, their own patrimonies or stakes in the project.
patrimonies, like vested interests.
Yeah, what they bring to the table, what matters to them. A client focused on sustainability brings that patrimony, shaping choices. It's a whole cast,
Yeah.
each with their own perspective.
Sounds like juggling act. What about the design itself as it develops?
That's another system. The system of the object being modeled, the design itself. As it takes shapes, sketches, models, digital files, it starts developing its own logic, its own demands, almost.
But it starts talking back.
Kind of. The paper uses this great analogy to Pirandello's play, 6 Characters in Search of an Author, where the characters seem real, demanding their story be told a certain way. The design can sometimes suggest its own direction, its own solutions or problems.
Fascinating. Okay, is it all the systems?
One more key one. The system of the School of Architecture, where the architect trained. The specific values, methods, even the unspoken rules of that institution.
Ah, so their education shapes their whole approach.
Profoundly. The paper contrasts 2 Venezuelan universities, UAA and UCV, showing how their different philosophies lead to different design sensibilities in their graduates. Your training forms a lens you look through.
Okay, so needs, place, culture, tools, the designer and everyone else, the design itself, and the school. That's a lot.
It is. And crucially, the paper stresses these aren't separate boxes. They're all tangled up, interacting constantly in this huge metasystem called Caótica in Arquitectura.
A system of systems.
Exactly. And it's so complex, so dynamic. You can't capture it perfectly in one model. You certainly can't predict its outcomes reliably. Everything influences everything else.
So if it's that chaotic and complex, how does anyone actually design anything? The paper mentions hermeneutics, interpretation.
Right. Because so much of design involves tacit knowledge, stuff that designer knows but can't easily articulate, plus intuition, memory, personal experience. Understanding it becomes an active interpretation, hermeneutics.
Especially for someone looking at it from the outside.
Yes. Trying to figure out why a designer made certain choices involves interpreting all these interacting influences, reconstructing their thought process. It's about finding the meaning within that complex web.
So it's less about a formula, more about reading the situation, reading the process. Now, Gödel's incompleteness theorem, that feels like a leap from architecture. How does math fit in?
It does seem abstract, yeah. Gödel's theorem basically says that in any formal system complex enough to do arithmetic, if it's consistent, there will be true statements within that system that the system itself cannot prove.
Whoa.
And the system can't even prove its own consistency from within itself. Simple version. No formal system can be both complete and provably consistent. There are always truths beyond its grasp.
Mind blown. Okay, so architecture. How does that relate?
The author gives it this really interesting humanistic spin. They suggest by analogy that someone inside a system can't fully understand the whole system. You need a metasystemic view, a way to step outside.
Like you're too close to see the big picture.
Pretty much. The paper uses the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as an example, how hard it is to grasp the whole dynamic when you're deeply embedded within one side of it.
Okay.
So for architecture, someone totally immersed in one school's way of thinking might struggle to truly understand or appreciate a completely different approach without consciously trying to step outside their own framework.
So that's the attempt at completeness, trying to get that outside view, even if perfect objectivity is impossible.
Exactly. It's the effort to step outside your own bubble, your school, your assumptions, to try and understand other perspectives. You might not get all the way out, but the attempt itself is valuable. It leads to richer understanding.
That connects nicely to another idea mentioned, Riddle's wicked problems. What are those?
Horst Riddle looked at design and planning problems and said, hang on, these are fundamentally different from typical science problems. He called them wicked problems.
Wicked? As in evil?
No, more like tricky, tangled, resistant to easy solutions. Wicked problems are ill-defined. You often don't fully understand the problem until you've tried a solution. Every solution have consequences, often unexpected ones, that might create new problems. There's no single right answer, and judging solutions involves values, not just objective facts.
So designing a building is a wicked problem. Messy, interconnected, no clear stop rule.
Definitely fits the description. Rittel contrasted the old way, first-generation systems analysis, which aimed for the optimal solution.
Like finding the one right answer?
Yeah. With his second-generation approach, which focused on objectivation, not objectivity, but making the reasons behind your judgments clear, sharing your assumptions, allowing for discussion and understanding, even without full agreement.
Making your thinking transparent.
Exactly, which links right back to that hermeneutic interpretive approach to understanding the design process. It's about the dialogue.
And Rittel also stressed that designers aren't totally in control, right? Context matters.
Hugely. His model shows this interplay. Context variables, stuff the designer can't control like the economy or zoning laws, design variables, the choices made, and performance variables, how it actually works out.
So a brilliant design might still fail if the context shifts.
Absolutely. Success isn't just about the design itself, it's about how it fits, or doesn't fit, into that wider, often unpredictable context. Reinforces the chaotic, interconnected nature of it all.
Okay, so the paper then uses examples from a master's program, the MD-ARC, to show this in action.
Yes, it gives some really concrete examples from a student project designing a student services center. It shows the team trying to figure out student needs, the university culture.
The system of needs and the sociocultural model.
Precisely. Then it tracks specific design choices. They're given codes in the text, like 046 centimeters for an exhibition area, and shows how they were influenced by everything.
Like what?
Well, the designer's own concepts about flexibility, a detail from an early sketch they liked, practical issues like materials, even feedback from tutors. You see all these systems colliding.
It really sounds like navigating a maze.
It is, and the tools matter too. They started with sketches, physical models, Modulex, cardboard, then moved to ArchiCAD. The very process of the student learning this new software ran alongside the design, influencing it.
Learning the tool shaped the outcome.
Subtly, yes. And other things creep in too, like having to define a thesis topic. That academic task actually pushed some design explorations in certain directions, trying to link the project to theory.
That's wild. A thesis influencing building design.
It shows how interconnected everything can become in that environment. Even logistical stuff, presenting the design remotely to reviewers in Venezuela, dealing with bad internet that became a factor impacting communication.
Technology hiccups affecting design reviews? Been there. What about advisor feedback?
Oh, definitely crucial. The text mentions specific feedback. One advisor sketching a reference to an Alvar Aalto building, another raising concerns about parking and program integration.
So the system of the designer includes that input.
Absolutely. That feedback directly led to revisions, changing the system of the object being modeled. It's that constant back and forth, the dialogue.
You mentioned recursion earlier that comes through here too.
Yes. The text highlights how they'd focus intensely on one part, the facade, say refine it, then zoom back out to see how it fit the whole, then maybe dive into another detail. Iterating, refining, integrating.
And the influence of the school's philosophy.
Yeah, the emphasis on character from the UCV approach, guided decisions about space, materials, the building's overall feel. You see the design evolving through different models, pushed and pulled by all these interacting chaotic systems.
It really does paint a picture of just layers upon layers of influence shaping the spaces we end up using.
That's the heart of it. Recognizing that what looks maybe straightforward from the outside is actually this incredibly complex dance of factors.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what are the big takeaways from this deep dive into chaos, architecture, Gödel, and all that?
I think the main thing is appreciating the sheer complexity of architectural design. It's not linear, it's not fully predictable, it's a dynamic mess of interconnected, chaotic systems.
Needs, place, culture, tools, people, the design itself.
All interacting. And because of that complexity, understanding it requires interpretation hermeneutics. And striving for that attempt at completeness, trying to see beyond our own perspective, is vital, even if perfect objectivity is out of reach.
And using ideas from science or math, like chaos theory or Gödel, not literally, but as analogies.
Exactly. Recontextualizing them gives us powerful new ways to think about a very human process like design, helping us grasp the messy reality of how our built world gets made.
It definitely makes you look at a building differently, knowing all that might have gone into it.
It should.
Yeah.
Which leads to our final thought for everyone listening. Think about any building, maybe one you're in right now or see every day.
Okay.
Knowing what we've discussed, what hidden complexities might have shaped it, what unseen needs, site constraints, cultural assumptions, tool limitations, or advisor comments might be embedded in its form. And what might happen if you try to consciously step outside the system, outside your own usual way of seeing that space, or any space. What new perspectives might open up about the world around us?
That's a great question to ponder. If this sparked your interest, definitely look more into chaos theory, Gödel's theorem, maybe Edgar Morin or Horst Riddle. Lots to explore there.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.